Thanks for tuning in to another episode of The Sacred Realms. And after doing the one about communicating with dead people, it's such a fascinating topic, and I get so many people asking me about this that I thought I would do a second part on that right away. Once again, thanks for tuning in. This is something that's very interesting to me. So many people have had experiences when it comes to people, of course, that they're really close to, either their parents or a loved one, or even sometimes a grandparent, sister or brother, anyone that passes away that we have a really deep connection with. There's always a distinct possibility that something will happen that will make a connection to them, even if we don't usually have out-of-body experiences. My mother had a lot of interesting experiences in her life. Now, she wasn't one that remembered her dreams, unfortunately, and so she did not have any lucid dreams or conscious out-of-body experiences. I'll never forget this story that she told me years ago. We had a Catholic priest in the family, Father Bijot. Now, apparently, I don't remember the whole specifics of the story here, but I didn't even know it as a child. I didn't know why he was so close to the family, but apparently he became an orphan at a young age, or he had lost his mother. I'm not completely sure if he'd lost both parents or what had happened there, but he ended up being raised in the same family as my father. So that's why he was considered almost one of the family. But he ended up becoming a Catholic priest, and he worked as a missionary most of his life in Bolivia. And I think that from my perspective, he was a very good, kind-hearted soul. And I remember him telling me many years ago, he said, you can't convert people, you can't preach the gospel to people, you can't talk to them about God when they have no food in their stomachs. So he spent a lot of his time volunteering, helping to work soup kitchens and feed people, take care of people, work out ways to get donations and to help these people that were so needy at that time. And we're talking about the 1970s in Bolivia. And I would imagine that in a lot of third world countries, that was a time of real hardship. So at some point in time, I believe he's no longer in Bolivia. I think he is perhaps in Montreal. I'm not 100% certain because I grew up in Canada. My family is all Canadian, although I live in Arizona at this point in time. But anyhow, he's in the hospital, and we know that he's probably going to pass away before too long. And at some point, my mother goes to take a shower, and she's coming out of the shower. She opens the shower curtain, and the entire large mirror that was across from the shower over top of the long sink became kind of hazy, and it was almost like a doorway to another dimension opened up. And she said that she saw him in the mirror. Now, this could have been kind of uncomfortable because, of course, she wasn't dressed. She was just grabbing a towel. But that didn't really enter her mind. There was none of those feelings. She just saw him, and she felt very much at ease with him being there in the mirror. I don't know. I've never had an experience like that, so it's hard for me to kind of think about how I would react to that. And this is not an everyday occurrence for my mother. This is sort of a once-in-a-lifetime kind of thing. So you can see how this would maybe have her a little bit confused or concerned or questioning your sanity, those kinds of things. But she knew right away. She knew what was going on. How she knew, I can't really explain it. But sometimes when you're in the midst of a situation like that, you have this overwhelming feeling about why something is happening. So she knew that he had come to say goodbye, that he had just passed away. And she goes and gets dressed, and she's sitting around in the kitchen. And about 20 minutes later, 30 minutes later, the phone rings, and someone calls and says to her that, I don't know if you know, I don't know if someone got the news to you about Father Bijot. And my mother said, oh, actually, I do know. And the lady who called said, oh, someone already got in touch with you? And of course, my mother, being in a little bit of a state of shock of the whole situation, just said, yeah, someone already got in touch with me. And she didn't explain it. But she later told me the story, and she said, I can't tell anyone else this story because I'm getting older and people are going to question my sanity. But she said, I know that you're going to understand this. And how this is a possibility, but she said that she felt very blessed that it had happened to her. I think that somehow there was this connection with my mother that, for whatever reason, even if she didn't have out-of-body experiences, there's a reason why she was my mother, why we somehow made this connection before I was born, that it was decided that I would be her child and she would be my mother. So I had a lot of out-of-body experiences with my mother, who's been gone almost a decade now. Some of the first ones were not that intense. There wasn't a whole lot necessarily that was being shared. There was still a feeling of warmth there, just knowing that, hey, this is my mom. And yes, she did pass on, but we still share this connection. So people might have this question, of course, is, well, how does this happen? How can you precipitate? How can you make this connection happen? And also what to expect. Now, for me, I'm going to say that you never know what to expect when this happens. It's really hard because everyone has a different connection with all the people that all our loved ones that have passed on. As I stated, a lot of my first experiences with my mother after she passed were not that grandiose. In fact, I remember sharing with my brother that I had a lot of out-of-body experiences with, that we both thought that my mom seemed like she was kind of stuck. She hadn't really let go and moved on to a higher state of consciousness, to a better place. That was a little bit concerning for both of us. That resolved itself. And then, earlier this year, in 2025, I had the most amazing out-of-body experience with my mother, where she was talking to me about different things that were going on in my life. And she shared this whole experience of how it was so important for people to be able to heal their past traumas, to be able to move on in their lives and to not get stuck in this pain. That was kind of the key to healing, was to, first of all, let yourself feel the pain. Don't try and deny it. And then hopefully that helps give you the key to work through those traumas and to heal them. And so she explained to me this very involved story. There's so many details to it about how it was when she first got married. And I never understood the whole story, and no one in our family ever understood it. It didn't make any sense because my mother had basically eloped. She was working as a young girl in a suburb of Vancouver, British Columbia. Her family was back in Saskatchewan. My father was apparently, she had met my father before, and he was apparently sending her letters and trying to convince her to come back and get married. And my mother was a little bit unsure. She was 22 years old when they got married, so she didn't quite know what to make of this. And at the same time, at that point in time, in 1950, she was concerned that she was going to turn into, the terminology in those days was, an old maid. And she certainly didn't want that to happen. But at the same time, this whole situation didn't make a whole lot of sense. And both of their families were not on board with this because they had never dated. It was a very bizarre situation. So apparently my father decides to take matters into his own hands, although my dad is already 26 years old at the time, living with his parents, no real money, no job, but somehow he gets on a train and goes cross-country to British Columbia and convinces my mother to marry my father. We didn't know all these details, but this is what my mother is sharing to me in the dream, that my father kind of conned my mom into believing that this was a good arrangement in spite of them never having dated. They never held hands. They never kissed, anything like that. He shows up and says, all right, let's get married, and you're going to get back on the train and come back with me to Saskatchewan. But he had nothing going on. He's living with his parents. And so she comes back. She actually does it. For whatever reason, thinks that this is a good idea. But remember, my dad's parents aren't on board, and then when he comes back, they're really upset, and now he's got her and moving back in with the parents that are really frustrated. It turns into a complete nightmare. My mother realized that my father She thought that somehow there was love that was going to be involved, but there really wasn't. It was just an agreement, this idea that my father had, because he was afraid that he was getting older as well. And in those days, you really needed to be married, have a wife, have a husband, have kids. They eventually ended up with a farm, but it turns out that it was his parents that either co-signed, bought the farm. He was making payments back to them. It's really unclear. No one seems to know completely. But my mother was really overwhelmed by this whole situation because my father was not in love with her, and she thought that maybe he loves her, but he did not. When it came time, for instance, for them to be intimate, it was more a matter of my father just wanted his needs met, if you know what I mean. So that was really, really upsetting and frustrating to my mother. She cried and was so lonely, and she had no one to talk to because she had alienated her parents and my dad's parents. And in those days, she couldn't go talk to her sisters because that would have been dishonoring her parents, who already were on the verge of disowning my mom. So when they didn't end up with their place and they ended up with kids and the whole series of events that happened, my mother experienced this ongoing emptiness and pain for so many years. And as a result, and because of that, she had nowhere to take that pain. She just carried it through her entire life, just suffered tremendously. So my mother is explaining all the details of this to me in the out-of-body experience. And it was so powerful. It was so intense. It was so painful. And yet, she was detached from it at this point. That was the beautiful part of it. She was basically telling me that she's sharing this because of all this pain that we go through in our lives, these traumas that we carry with us, how it's so important that we find a way to come to terms with them, to heal them, so that we don't let this suffering eat us up, so that you don't end up with all kinds of diseases that haunt you later in life, which is what happened to my mother. And she was saying that's why it happened, because she carried this pain with her entire life into her old age, because she had no way to process it and no one to talk to. Now, if that's not a powerful out-of-body experience, I don't know what is. And it was extremely personal for me, of course. And how wonderful it was for my mother to be able to share this intimate story with me with all these details of what happened to her. Yes, it's sad. Yes, it's painful. And yes, it was bringing me to tears to understand these things about my mother. But at the same time, there's wisdom there. There's opportunity for growth. So that's why I'm saying, what can you expect? For instance, when you have an out-of-body experience with a loved one that's passed on, you have no idea what to expect. You have no idea how it might impact you. It might be just a short little snippet. It might just be a feeling of reuniting with someone that you've loved and feeling that beautiful, loving connection that carries on, that is not diminished in any way, shape, or form just because that person has passed on. That's a beautiful thing. But what I'm telling you is it might be way more intense, way more deep, and way more grandiose than that, like that one that happened with my mother. There's no way I could have predicted that. And she shared so much information with me that there's no way that I could have known that physically. So that's what I'm saying. It might be way more powerful than you think. So the next question is, of course, how does this happen? Or how can you make it happen? My experience has always been that it just happens. And it happens because you have that deep connection with someone. Can you go looking for it? I suppose that you could, but I think it's more a result of just having that deep connection. Maybe you miss that person, and then for whatever reason, that's what draws the experience to you. For me, what I found is over time, as much as I love really cosmic out-of-body experiences and flying and seeing stars and being off-planet and all these kinds of really cool things and meeting aliens, yeah, I do love that kind of stuff. But ultimately, I think that the power of the out-of-body experience is when it has the potential to really to heal different things that are unhealed within you, to transform you, to bring you deep knowledge, and to bring your whole existence up to a higher level of awareness and understanding. That's the true power of out-of-body experiences. So that's the basic story that I wanted to share with you today. Again, there's no telling, because I don't know the relationships that you have with these people. I don't know if you have things that are unhealed, because sometimes people have things that they wish they would have said to someone while they were still alive. And you can still have that ability to do. In fact, you could have conversations just while you're sitting there, and you could say, Mom, if you were still here, here's what I would tell you. And guess what? She's going to get that information. And maybe intuitively you'll pick up on certain things from your loved ones as well. Maybe you'll get certain feelings. So it doesn't necessarily have to happen while you're out of body. But let me tell you, it can be overwhelming and so intense to have an out-of-body experience like the one that I'm discussing with my mother. So it can happen, and it can be really powerful. And I'm saying just stay open, because this one happened many, many years after my mom had passed. And I did have many many out-of-body experiences with my mom, but I didn't expect this one, because it had been quite some time since I had one. So I'm saying, even if it's been years, it can happen. Just be open, and when it does happen, be grateful and be thankful for the opportunity for growth and all the lessons and wisdom that can be shared in this kind of an out-of-body experience, because these are really special. I hope that if you do have out-of-body experiences, that maybe something like this can happen to you some way, because it's really so powerful to be able to have this one-on-one intimate communication with your loved ones that have passed on in an out-of-body experience. So thanks again for tuning in to this episode of the Sacred Realms.